Today we are going to be talking about the home and community-based settings rule, and which is a federal policy change announced by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, in January 2014 to make sure that people with disabilities have the kinds of services they need in their communities. The rule sets requirements to ensure that people receiving services through Medicaid, home and community-based services waiver programs have full access to community of life. In this webinar, CQL will provide foundational information to understand the components and the rules, what these rules mean for people receiving services, expectations for providers, and how the rules impact annual planning processes. This session is part of the Supporting Families webinar series, which connects families of people receiving services and advocates in Maryland to topics related to the state's transformation initiatives. The vision of CQL is a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people. And the mission of CQL is dedicated to the definition, measurement, and improvement of personal quality of life. Next, we're going to be talking about specifics of the settings rule. The first area to consider are how it was developed. So it was developed with extensive public input over more than 5 years. It is a common myth that this rule came out of the blue from the federal government, but in fact it took shape over multiple years and through multiple conversations. It include multiple rounds of proposed rulemaking, advocacy, and inclusion of thousands of public comments. Change from being solely focused on size or geographic location to one focus on the individual experience that people have in their community integration in both residential and non-residential services. We'll talk about both of those settings here in the webinar today. The values and concepts within the home and community-based settings rule include integration, which is meaningful participation for individuals with disabilities into all aspects of a society, ensuring that they have equal access to opportunities, including resources and services. Another value and concept includes choice, a focus on individual rights, from access to areas within their home to the ability to have visitors within one's home. Independence, which includes dignity of risk and ensuring that people have the opportunity to grow and flourish. Privacy, dignity and respect, freedom from coercion, and freedom from restraint. We will talk about these further in the webinar today. Now, for the home and community-based settings rule, how many of you were able to choose where you live, choose who you want to live with, have personal space and time alone, come and go as you please, set your own schedule? Perhaps that includes how often you want to set the snooze button in the morning, or decide if you want to watch one more show at the end of the day before you go to bed. Choose how you spend your money. Choose who cuts your hair. So if you didn't like it at one particular place, do you have the choice of another? Choose which grocery store you go to. Choose which pharmacy you use. Choose which doctor that you get to see. Choose which church or religious service, if there's any that you would like to attend. And then choose where you would like to work. Going back to those values and concepts, choice is expected and is a value within the home and community-based settings rule. Now flip that into considering when your family member no longer lives with you, do you want them to be able to choose where they live and who they want to live with? Have their own personal space and time alone in the setting that they desire and the ability to make that feel like a home for themselves. Come and go as they please, set their own schedule. Again, it can include if they want to wake up, what time they want to wake up in the morning or what time they want to go to bed. But ultimately, it's about how they want their day to look. They make that decision and direct their day themselves. Choose how to spend their money and what they want to spend their money on. Choose who cuts their hair. Again, is there another example? Choose which grocery store to go to. Choose which pharmacy to use. Choose which doctor to see. Choose which church religious service that they would like to attend. And choose where to work. These choices go back to the values and concepts that help form the home and community-based settings rule and are included in the criteria and the rules for today. But considerations help shape the framework and understanding of what that person-centered process looks like. We'll talk about here in a little bit. The intent of the home and community-based settings rule is to ensure people receiving services have full access to the benefits of community living. Ensure people have the opportunity to receive services in the most integrated setting possible. Enhance the quality of services. So within CQL's mission and vision that we started the webinar with today, quality of services is all about raising the bar. And as we learn more from people that receive services, how can we enhance their quality of life and quality of services? Provide protections to people, including but not limited to protecting rights afforded to all people. Again, going back to those values and concepts that include rights. Key provisions within the home and community-based settings rule include the ability to define, describe, and establish those quality requirements. Establishing an outcome-oriented definition based on those individual experiences. So as you learn more from people, the outcomes adapt to those individual experiences. Maximizing opportunities for access to integrated community living. So as we learn more from people, what they want their experiences and opportunities and access to look like, that is it adapts to those new experiences. And then defining person-centered planning requirements. And we'll talk about those specific provisions in the call today, in our webinar today. Now we're going to dive into key parts of the settings rule. Qualities of places where people receive services. Now the location is integrated in the greater community. Within that, we are going to talk about what does that mean. So people live in neighborhoods with people without disabilities. So is the neighborhood where people live integrated? Can people with and out without disabilities live in that location? Are people supported to fully participate in that community? Thinking about the inclusion and integration and engagement to be fully involved. For example, if you're walking around your neighborhood, do you say hello to your neighbors? Do you know who your neighbors are? Are you part of that full participation in your community setting? Kind of going back to those questions to consider for you and for your loved ones and family members. Person chooses where they live from different options or choices. So are there a variety of places for people to consider? For example, if I'm looking for a place that is close to where I work, am I looking at locations that meet that person-directed component of my life? I want to live where I work, so are those options presented to me? Or if somebody wants to live close to public transportation or a route, are those options available as well? Those types of considerations are really what moves integration in the community forward, because again, it's based on the definitions from the person and learning what matters most to them and what community truly means to them. People do many different things in the community is based on the desires of each person, but again, that's what that community should be built upon it. And once we learn more from people and involve them in that person-centered planning process, community should match their definition. If you're living in a rural area, people can travel around and participate in community life in the same way that other people who live in the community do. Your community might look differently. You might have more connection to neighbors because of that rural environment, or you might know more resources with that innate intimate knowledge than you would in a broader community setting or a more cityscape. So these are the considerations when it comes to community, but it must be based on the definition of the person of what they want their community look like, from neighborhoods to location to participation. So location supports full access to the greater community. So not just that participation, but taking that one step further into full access. So full access, what does that mean? Opportunities to work in competitive integrated settings. So again, once I know that definition of community, how can we take that one step further into people choosing where they want to work and being in that competitive integrated setting when it comes to work? Again, it must be at least minimum wage and with people who do not have disabilities. We'll discuss more about employment and day supports later in this webinar as well. Engaging in community life. And engaging means participate and involvement, being connected. And again, this can be what is defined by the person. Their type of and frequency of engagement is dependent on what they desire. And they can control personal resources like their money. That goes back to those values and concepts within the home and community-based settings rule, and participate in the life of the community like anybody else. Full access means full to the fullest extent. What it does not mean is the only time a person can go on a community in the community is on a group trip or outing. And I don't know about you, but I often don't use the phrase, I'm going out in the community. I often use phrases like, I'm going to the store or I'm going to run an errand. When we treat it as something as a hill to climb or a hurdle to overcome, it doesn't become part of full access. So we've got to consider those person-centered approaches when it comes to someone's definition of community life so that full access meets that definition. Full access also does not mean all activities are scheduled by staff without asking people their interests. Are people involved in that schedule and how they want their day to be directed? There are times that you may want to run errands when the store is less busy, or there might be times where you want to run to the store when it is more busy so you can see more people and meet more friends. But that is, again, that personal definition that's within the home and community-based settings rule so that people have the ability to direct their schedule, which then moves further into that full access. Participating in the community does or doing the same with limited set of activities without experiencing the full set and lots of different options. So within that, we want to consider education, experience, and exposure so people have access to do the things that they desire based on one, education, the things that they learn, the experiences that they have to learn. I do like to go to the store when I can see more people, or I do like to go meet my friends for coffee at this particular coffee house at this particular time. We learn that through experiences, but the other part of full access is exposure. Within the Q&A, Seth was able to share video and resources on what we call the 3 E's. Again, going back to education, experience, and exposure, because full access means that we are giving people the opportunities to experience that, to define community for themselves. Another component of the home and community-based settings rule is the location must ensure a person's rights, including the right to privacy, having the option to be alone or spend time with other people at home and in the community. There are many components to privacy, again, that are part of somebody's individual definition, and we've got to respect everyone's definition of what that entails. Seth included in the Q&A some rights-related resources as it furthers the values and concepts within the home and community-based settings rule. Individual rights also means the expectation for respect, high regard for the feelings, property, wishes, rights, opinions, and or traditions of people. All of those components go back to those questions to consider. Are we asking people how they want their day to look? What do they want are their opinions valued? Are we focusing on the strengths that people have so that we can further the wishes and traditions and connections and feelings that they have by showing them respect, showing them listening, that we listen, that we know that each person has value, and by showing that each person has value, we are providing the resources to help them direct their day and what they would like their life to look like. The next part of individual rights, and what does this mean, is with respect to dignity, regard to dignity. People being able to do things that are important to them, speak up for themselves, and be the person they are and want to be. So again, considering the preferences that people have, respecting that, by supporting somebody to go to practice their faith in the manner that they choose, or considering um, what their preferences are and how they want their day to look, or how they want the choices to be presented to them. One big component of dignity is ensuring that we are providing communication and resources in the manner that each person desires. So we always need to start with having a good understanding of how people communicate so that we can provide them the dignity to have the resources in the manner um, that they desire. And we'll talk a little bit more about that communication tool as it relates to person-centered planning later in the webinar. Another aspect of individual rights, and what does this mean, connects to presuming competence. Assume all people can think, learn, and understand regardless of disability or communication style. Seth provided a wonderful video on presuming competence that can be great to better understand how to build on the strengths of others, and listening to what the strengths of your family members are, to build on that and provide those resources to, again, move the 3 E's forward. Because if we presume the strengths of others, we can start looking at education, experience, and exposure to help further the strengths of your family members. What individual rights do not mean, or what does this mean, is one other aspect in values and the concepts is with regard to freedom from coercion and freedom from restraint. So first area, freedom from coercion. People can make decisions without being pressured or forced to do something that they do not want to do. So considerations of pressure to make decisions that do not reflect um, the desires, the dignity and respect, presuming competence that people want. So that can be in consideration to people feeling pressured to wake up at a certain time of a day, or go to practice a faith that they do not want to be a part of, or be a part of a group when they don't want to be. So again, freedom from coercion really is about that pressure to be involved in something that does not meet their definition of quality of life, or what they want their life to look like. And then people aren't talked into something that they don't want to do. One way that this can happen is limiting the pool of choices that people can participate in. If someone is not presented the full array of options when it comes to places that they want to go, or things that they want to experience, or resources to learn about, that is a pathway that sometimes can put pressure on people, so that they have a limited array of options to choose from, and then they don't ultimately get to have their wishes or desires heard. Another aspect of individual rights and the values and concepts of the home and community-based settings rule goes to freedom from restraint. And that ties to people's movements and access to their bodies is not limited. And so ensuring that freedom and restraint components are really a non-negotiable when it comes to the home and community-based settings rule. Another aspect within the home and community-based settings rule with regards to the physical settings is the location encourages individual initiative, autonomy, and independence in making life choices. I'm going to read that one more time. The location encourages individual initiative, autonomy, and independence in making life choices. I tie that to the space reflects your authentic self, and that you are real. The people your family members are really moving that setting forward to match what they want their life to look like. So, what does this mean? Making life decisions, being in charge, being able to do things on one's own as much as possible. Again, going back to those values and concepts within that are the framework of the home and community-based settings rule, independence. So it's all about what people do each day, where people live, work, or spend time, and who people have relationships with. An example I'd like to bring forward is from someone that receives services. Their home is set in designed in the manner that they choose. Their furniture is designed based on their physical needs. They have some adaptive equipment. They enjoy all of the holidays, so they have multiple decorations within their own home. But one thing that stood out to me in this particular setting that reflects their authentic self was a vision board on the fridge. This vision board showed that they are in charge. They know what they want their life to look like. They're involved in life decisions, and they are really setting the expectation for anyone coming in their home that this is the level of support that they want and how they want their life to look. Another example within that same home, so right under the vision board on the fridge, if you're visualize with me for a moment, was a social calendar for this particular person. And on that social calendar included going out for pizza with friends, meeting family members for coffee, planning a future gardening club as we're coming upon spring. They were directing what they wanted their life to look like, and their setting reflected that as well. What is unique to the home and community, what it makes the home and community-based settings rule unique is it relates to each individual person. No one setting will look the same because no one person is the same, and that should align in how the settings rule and supports further the quality of life for people supported and family members that you know about. A next area is the location. Make sure that people have a choice about their services and supports, as well as who provides them. The location makes sure that one that they have that the choice of services aligns with their desired definition of life, what independence means for each person, and ultimately going back to choices that they are a part of. So, choice, what does this mean? Control over where and with whom to live. So, are people involved in the choices, not only location, going back to the settings of the neighborhood and the home, but who they want to live with as well? Are they involved in the choices of um, who will be living within that setting? Are they involved in perhaps getting to know people before moving into a particular setting, whether they may already live there or they intend to move somewhere else? Or if you want to live independently, are you able to exercise that choice as well? Choice is incredibly important in establishing the expectation of where and with whom they live and the array of options being presented. Control over where to work and how to earn money, being informed about the different options available, choosing individual schedules, choosing individual career pathways, exploring what that career ladder could look like in different settings based on the desires and goals for each person that you know, And then our options being presented to kind of frame out of what to do during the day. And we're going to be talking about specific about day supports here soon. And decisions about who to interact with or spend time with. If I'm making choices of the places that I want to go, the things I want to be a part of, who do I want to bring along with me in those experiences? And then last but not least, are we selecting the service providers that match those particular goals? Going back to the example with the vision board and social calendar on the fridge, the selection of service providers really sets the tone of, are you somebody that's going to help move my dreams forward? Are you somebody that can keep up with this social calendar? Are you somebody that can really meet the definitions that I set forth of what I want my life to look like, or the connections I want to be a part of, and really furthering those home and community-based settings rule values and concepts. And so are we providing choices to ensure that people are selecting the service providers that match those other aspects of choice? So in terms of the home and community-based settings rule, what are some requirements for provider-owned or operated locations? Along with meeting general requirements of the home and community-based settings rule regarding those community-based settings, residential settings for provider-owned or operated locations must ensure people have a lease or other legally enforceable agreement to protect from eviction. Are people provided the opportunity to learn about all of the components of what that lease includes? The rights and responsibilities of holding a lease? And are we ensuring people have the, again, education, experience, and exposure to know what those components mean? Another expectation is privacy, including the ability to lock bedroom doors and access to locked home entrances. Do the people that are your family members, are people supported, provided a key to their home or access to their home or access to their Ring doorbell if they're have that in their home? Really making it go that ownership from leaseholder to being a participant in all aspects of their home environment and using their own environment to ensure privacy and protecting their own space. Choice of where and with whom to live, again, going back to that central central thread as it relates to the values and concepts of the home and community-based settings rule, that choice is foundational. Freedom to furnish and decorate. I mentioned the person who chose to decorate for the holidays. Everybody has the ability to decorate based on their values, what they desire, what they're excited about. So for some people, it might be sports. Some people, it might be movies, whatever is interested in. If I were to walk into that person's home, does it reflect who they are, their authentic selves? Or would we see more provider-driven decor? It would not reflect the home of the people that live there, but rather the home of the provider. Control of schedule and activities. So are the schedules being developed by the people that live there? Are they truly directing what they want their day to look like, including all parts of their schedule? Or is a schedule designed and posted somewhere in the home without their involvement and decision making in that? Access to preferred food at any time. So can I run to the fridge for a midnight snack and grab the ice cream that I desire? Or is food not able to be accessed at certain parts of the day? The expectation is that those things would be available at any point for anybody. Visitors of their choosing at any time. Are people given the opportunity and feel respected to have people over when they choose? Visitors of their choosing at any time. And physical accessibility. The apartment for the person I mentioned, they did have furniture established and some adaptive equipment so that they have full accessibility within their home. And it again matches their dreams, their desires of what they want their life to look like, and the expectations are set within their setting to know from the gate, right out of the gate, that that is what they want for their services and supports. In terms of the settings rule, we'll now transition to what it means for work and day. So we talked a lot about the residential and the physical setting. Now we're going to move into what it means for work and day. One thing to know is that the settings rule applies here too. So for day programs, the same general rules found in the settings rule apply to where people work and what they do during the day. So how do the home and community-based settings rule apply to non-residential settings? The home and community-based settings rule apply to any setting in which home and community-based services are provided, both residential and non-residential. CMS created a set of exploratory questions to assist states in assessing non-residential settings for compliance with the rules. As with residential settings, all non-residential settings must comply with the federal requirements that the setting provide opportunities for participants to engage in community life, to have access to the community, to control their personal resources, and to seek employment and work in community settings. Any non-residential settings, including employment settings and day programs, must be assessed using the same criteria that apply to all other settings. Specifically, does the program have characteristics that isolate participants from the broader community? Are people, again, going back to that concept of full access to engage in community of life? In other words, do people have the same level of access to their community as individuals who may not receive Medicaid? If these factors are not in place, then we must indicate how they'll be addressed within individual state plans. CMS also noted that pre-vocational services need not be facility-based and be offered in a variety of settings in the community. Again, the whole central theme of all of those: engagement and access, choice, and seeking employment to work in those community settings includes those access and choice threaded through residential settings and non-residential settings. So with regards to day services, some other things to consider: access to and training on the use of public transportation, an ability to engage in employment and day services activities, a secure place like a locker for people to put their belongings, and it is really a connection to that value of privacy. It's connections to those values and concepts as it relates to rights. It's created those values and concepts as it relates to independence. Choice about who to do activities with, and options to do things outside of the day program building. Full access as it relates to day program settings. Some more things to consider as it relates to day services are: is there a staff bathroom? Is there that full access to the whole environment? And the concept of that staff bathroom, or perhaps it's a staff office in a residential setting, is it does not give people that full inclusion or full access to the environment to truly say that that is part of their setting, that they are directing what that setting looks like. Are there rules that keep people from being able to open doors, go to certain rooms or places, or outside if they want? Are there locks or gates to keep people from going to certain places within the building? Perhaps there are those informal rules, not formal rules or posted rules, but they're practices that create these same barriers. And are people receiving services treated with dignity and respect? So by learning what the dreams and desires are of people within day services, to how are the day supports then furthering that forward? For example, if I want to get a job at a library, how are day supports supporting that and treated with that presuming concept or competence and dignity and respect to move that dream of working in the library forward? Perhaps it's volunteering in different library settings. Perhaps it's learning more about what that job includes, and ultimately how the settings rule can be supported, including within day services, are those 3 E's: education, experience, and exposure, to help move those forward. When it comes to treating people with respect and dignity within day services, can people eat lunch with whomever they want? Are people choosing when they want to eat as well? Can people have the same food as staff or visitors? If the staff can buy pop or snacks, can the people who receive services do the same? One example, I was at a training and pop and food was brought in for this particular training at a day service, but there was a rule posted that pop could not be brought into the day service. So I was asking about that particular rule, and there was the conversation about how that was for people that receive services and not for staff. Since the home and community-based settings rule, that particular situation has changed, but it really is a good indicator of what those informal practices or formal rules can do to eliminate full access to a setting, not just by physical barriers, but by practices as well. Can people eat where they want? Are they choosing where they want to eat? Or does everybody have a assigned table, assigned person that they sit next to? Can I change it, my mind, if I want to sit by somebody else and get to know a new friend? Can people talk to others during break or at meal times? Again, this is just the non-negotiable of respect and dignity when it comes to a setting where day services are provided. Next, we're going to be talking about person-centered planning. So with regards to person-centered planning, it is ultimately directed by the person. I gave the example of the vision board for the person that chose to really say what they wanted their life to look like visually. And it really set the expectation that these are the things that they want to put in place over the coming year. Person-centered planning must be directed by each individual person. It includes who the person chooses, who is involved in that person-centered planning process. Are we ensuring that people are inviting the people that they want to be champions, that they want to be part of that planning experience? Seth is including POM and person-centered planning as really wonderful resources to consider to ensure that people are directing that person-centered planning process. It happens when and where the person chooses. And are we ensuring that the person-centered planning process or annual meeting takes place when and where they want? That may reflect the dreams and goals that the person wants to convey by having those meetings in a variety of settings determined by the person. Self-direction and person-centered planning reflective of that person's desires is respected right out of the gate. And we're giving, again, that central thread of choice the ability to do so. Again, there's that other central thread when it comes to full access by people choosing where they want that conversation to occur. Goals are chosen by the person. Outlines who, what, and when of service provision. And this can take place in a variety of formats that the person can understand. So I gave the example of the vision board. There are numerous creative ways that people can lead their person-centered planning process, from a slideshow presentation to pages that they want to present from different people so that are part of that planning team. They can have really a variety of videos, a variety of ways that ensure the plan is in the format that the person can understand. But to get there, you need to really have the expectation set forth from the beginning that they are presenting it in the format that they desire. And again, going back to dignity and respect, it's in the communication platform that each person utilizes, and we're respecting that. With regards to the settings rule, what it means for temporary restrictions. So temporary restrictions or rights restriction or temporary modification or rights restrictions are sometimes that people need extra support and may not be able to take part in all the freedoms the new rule provides. When that happens, the provider has very strict rules and steps that they have to follow. So we talked about choice and full access. And so if those things are not in place, then what are those additional modifications that we need to include? It is based on, the modification must be based on a specific need. Show that positive interventions have been tried. Show that less intrusive methods have been tried but haven't worked, and document it. Show that the support indicated is directly proportionate to the specific assessed need. Keep measuring to determine if the modification is effective, and show that any modification is temporary. Review them regularly to show it's still needed. Get informed consent, and show the intervention will cause no harm. I'm going to take those steps and provide you with an example of a situation where I was filling in as an on-call support, and somebody that was receiving services had their pop and cigarettes locked up. And it was not based on any specific need. It was a practice that I did not fully understand, and nor did the person supported fully understand. And less intrusive measures and methods had not been tried at the time. And when I was trying to help support the person based on how that modification was set up, I could not find the key to access that locked area. And ultimately, the person supported who had the modification in place showed me how to access their their lockbox for their pop access and cigarette access. And it just showed that the modification was not necessary. There was not informed consent because they did not choose to have that restriction in place. And it was not it did not have that regular review to return that modification back to their full rights. And ultimately, this was a really wonderful exercise to help ensure people we support are always at the table to know what their restriction or modification rather is in place, and that that any modification has a regular review. If not, some things just continue over time. They become those informal practices that eliminate choice, that eliminate full access, and people no longer feel that their dignity and respect and voice is heard because those modifications do not get that regular review and do not include the person. So the thread of ensuring that people have choice and full access goes into this modifications area as well. Ultimately, the home and community-based settings are all about choice. We talked about residential settings of ensuring full access. We talked about the values and concepts that can help further the home and community-based settings rule, which includes integration, choice, individual rights, independence, privacy, dignity and respect, freedom from coercion, and freedom from restraint. Ultimately, this rule aims to ensure people are integrated into their communities and live in settings, locations that are as close to home and as independent as possible. Additional ways it can impact families: promoting family involvement in the planning process. So being invited and being included in helping people, your family members, set their dreams and goals, and knowing that that the strength and the dignity and respect that each of your family members has is respected and encouraged in that planning processes. Encourages more flexibility and approach to providing services. Going back to those considerations, all of that includes an element of flexibility. In choosing how you want your life or your day or your week or your month to look like includes flexibility. That level of flexibility can help families better meet their child's need, empowers children to transition to greater independence over time in real and natural environments. That full access prioritizes people and their families' preferences and needs. And in summary, the home and community-based settings rule can positively impact families by promoting integration, person-centered care, and increased independence. The foundational essence of the home and community-based settings rule is rich, valued lives as a part of the community, engagement in the community. Lastly, I know Seth has shared incredible resources during our webinar today. Please feel free to utilize each of those resources as building blocks to person-centered planning, having more opportunities to better understand choice, and then summarize some of the things that we were able to talk about today with videos, including the 3 E's and presuming competence as well. Additional resources are included here: the Home and Community-Based Services Act project, the Home and Community-Based Services Advocacy Coalition, and the Maryland DDA information on the Home and Community-Based Settings rule as well. Now we will open up to questions that have been trickling in during our webinar today.
Thank you, Lucy. We have a couple of questions, or we actually have a handful of questions, so we're just going to take them one by one. Seth, do you want to read these so we can kind of all answer them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions was specific to CQL's personal outcome measures, and the question was, for the personal outcome measures, continuity and security, how does this work in regards to service delivery? This is an extremely important outcome for my son, so I would like to know more about it.
I certainly could answer that. It is really about being able to direct change and direct schedules. And so some of those foundational components within the personal outcome measures of continuity and security is the ability to know what changes are coming, know what's happening, and being involved in that process. One of the examples I provide sometimes in training was the first day I started as a direct support professional supporting people. I walked into a home and I had no idea that that was even the job I was doing. And someone told me to go give 2 gentlemen a shower and make breakfast for 6 people. And I always go back to that particular day and imagine it from the point of view from someone receiving services. They had no idea I was coming. They had no idea who I was. And it was an incredibly unfortunate situation anytime someone would ask me to cook a meal for somebody. So I always go back to that as it relates to continuity and services, as it relates to directing change. Are you involved in that process?
Great answer. Anything, Kate or Lindsay, to add, or can I move on to the next?
No, it's great.
Next, another question is, What if the person with disabilities receiving services is not able to make decisions? Lucy, this is during kind of your section on choices and self-determination. Does this fall on the guardian? Question.
It
Yeah.
would fall on the guardian with the input of the person receiving services. Best practice is that the guardian always has the person's best interest at heart, and then what the person really wants to do with their lives. So taking that into consideration, it would be both the person and the guardian, because, no matter what someone's communication style is, they still communicate. And we would hope that the guardian would know the person well enough to be able to understand that person's communication style so they can help make those decisions. Lucy, do you want to add?
Yes, I'll mention there's a resource called the Personal Outcome Measures and Pictures that's also been helpful to better explain some of the concepts that may be within the personal outcome measures, but many tie to the home and community-based settings rule as well. And there's personal outcome measures and pictures for children and adults.
Excellent. I did just put in a link in the chat box to the Palm and Pictures guide, so people can check it out there if they would like. We did have a couple other questions that were pretty similar to that one, but I'll ask them again just in case there's anything else we want to elaborate on. So can a full guardian give consent to a modification when the person themselves does not? For example, food restrictions related to an allergy that the person wants to eat, but it's unsafe. So kind of similar to those, to what we just covered, but just in case there's anything else we wanted to tackle.
It really does connect back to the due process procedure and the expectations of that modification to, again, ensure that it is temporary, that it is reviewed frequently, and it's really the least restrictive option in place, that really that kind of choice and full array of options that we talk about within residential settings or day service settings applies to that, those modifications as well, that we're looking at the full picture of what could be explored before applying that modification in place or putting that modification in place.
Good. Anything, Lindsay, Kate, to add to it? Are we good to move on?
I would add that, when undergoing a due process, standing committees in Maryland, a lot of people refer to them as human rights committees, to ensure that it's full due process and that the committee is looking at all aspects and then really ensuring that any modification is the least restrictive and has, reasonable expectations to restore the right that has been modified.
Moving on to another question. Would it be considered a violation of the HCBS settings rule if a provider will not provide staffing to allow a person to attend the church of their choice?
So without much more information, I would say, it could be a violation of implementing the person-centered plan. If it's important to the person to go to church and, they want to go to church and the agency can't take them, for staffing issues or whatever, can you work with the agency to support the person to find maybe a volunteer or another person that goes to that church, to provide transportation and support while they do that? This is a perfect opportunity to look at natural supports, to make sure that that person is getting the spiritual enrichment that they need.
Great response. In a second, I'll put in a resource to natural supports into the chat box as well, of course.
Thank you, Seth.
The question might be a little bit too specific, but we'll see. If a person locks their bedroom door and it's detrimental to their seizure diagnosis, can an amendment be made to their person-centered plan to have access to their room for their safety, right? And if we want to broaden it to just in general of like a rights restriction topic or that kind of a thing, we can.
This would be a type of modification that would need an element of review, for particular safety, health areas of someone's life. Those are considerations that often get reviewed as it relates to those modifications. Again, the goal would be to look at other options. Perhaps it is a different type of monitoring, or that rather than needing to be fully involved in someone's going into somebody's room. Perhaps it's a health alert button, so they could still keep their right to privacy. There's a lot of those technology available to help further that knowledge while still protecting the rights and privacy of a family member.
Great answer, Lucy. There's another question around guardianship here. Sorry, Seth, about if a provider must get guardianship for people they support who don't have family involved. No. I mean, there are certain criteria that have to be met for a person to have a guardian. And, it is best practice for that to be it's the most restrictive option, is for someone to have a guardian. So thinking of things like supported decision making, looking at just people in the person's life that could help make decisions. I have people that I call when I have to make an important decision. I'll call my mom or my sister or a group of friends or whomever, because I want to bounce ideas off people, and I may use that too. So think of those least restrictive options. If a person doesn't have a guardian, they may not need one. They just may need support, which is always the best option. And it's typical for all of us to need support when we make some decisions. Like what to have for dinner. I mean, I never know.
And I'm not cooking, Kate.
No, I know better. I do know that. I do know I don't want Lucy to cook unless we're having
No.
PTA.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know that we're hitting basically the top of the hour, and we want to be respectful of people's times. There were additional questions in the Q&A, but they were, as we had said at the beginning of the webinar, they're very specific to Maryland DDA, to issues going on in Maryland. Again, we encourage you to contact DDA directly to get those addressed. They're the best ones to handle those. But I do want to say thank you to DDA for helping us with putting on this webinar. Thank you to Lucy for the wonderful presentation. Thank you to Catherine and Lindsay for all the webinar support, Q&A stuff and everything. And of course, thank you to all the attendees for taking a time, out of your day and spending an hour with us. And of course, DDA will be in more communication with you all on 2 additional sessions that are coming in the following weeks and months. So be on the lookout for those. Anything else, Catherine, Lindsay, Lucy, anything you have to add before we close out?
No, thank you for the great questions and the great attendance for this webinar. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.